Hello everyone. So friends, one of the last lectures in the series of general antimicrobial agents. We are going to discuss today those antimicrobial agents which are not classified into any groups. Okay, and we have labeled them as miscellaneous or other antimicrobial agents. Okay, they cannot be classified. They are group. They have been subdivided into groups. They cannot be classified like beta lactams or aminoglycoside. Hence, they have been classified as miscellaneous antimicrobial agents. So, among these agents, we will be discussing today about lincosamides, okay, which includes two members, lincomycin, clindamycin, out of which clindamycin is being used currently in clinical practice. So, we will be discussing it. Then we have glycopeptide antibiotics, includes two main drugs, teicoplanin and vancomycin, one of the very important drugs which are being used in current clinical practice. Oxazolidinones, a synthetic antimicrobial group which includes the member linezolide and a newer member tedizolide. Both have been approved by the FDA and they are one of the newer drugs now which are very effective against organisms which are resistant to the other drugs which we have previously studied. Other drugs include quinupristin, dalfupristin, and now these agents belong to the pristinamycin derivatives. They are obtained, they are semi-synthetic in nature, they are obtained from soil actinomyces. Spectinomycin, an aminoglycoside like drug, mupirocin, fusidic acid, polymyxin B and colistin. Now these polymyxin B and colistin, these are not new drugs. Like they were discovered even before the penicillins, but because of their toxicity, they were not being used in clinical practice. But because of the development of multi-drug resistant strains among many bacteria, they have now come into clinical picture. Also, again, topically they are used. Topically, they do not cause any adverse effects, and topically they are very much in use. Another drug which is used topically is bacitracin. So we will be discussing these many antimicrobial agents today. We will see them one by one. Out of which glycopeptides, oxazolidinones, they are very important, and some new drugs like quinupristin, dalfupristin. We have to have some knowledge about these drugs as well. So first is clindamycin, that is lincosamides. Okay, this drug belong to the lincosamide group. Its first member was lincomycin, but because of its toxicity, clindamycin it is used. So it is a lincosamide antibiotic. It is similar in mechanism of action to erythromycin. Erythromycin, as you all know, is a macrolide. It belongs to the macrolide group of drugs. So you are very well aware of erythromycin's mechanism of action. It acts by inhibiting protein synthesis. It binds to the 50S ribosomal subunits, and it inhibits the transfer of the newly growing peptide chain, the nascent peptide chain from A site to P site. Always remember that the binding sites for erythromycin, clindamycin and chloramphenicol, they are very adjacent to each other, and thus they show mutual antagonism in their actions. So all these three drugs, they are never to be combined together. Okay, that principle has to be kept in mind. Now this principle I have already stated when I have taken the lecture of chloramphenicol. In that video I have already discussed that. Here I am also emphasizing on in same fact that clindamycin, erythromycin and chloramphenicol, they should not be combined together. The simple reason is they share the binding site very adjacent to each other, and thus they can produce mutual antagonism. Again, like erythromycin, it has similar spectrum of action and shows some cross resistance with erythromycin. The mechanism of resistance, just like in erythromycin, here also the mechanism of resistance is altered binding site on the 50S ribosomal subunit. That is, there is a protection or production of ribosomal protection protein. See, what bacteria do is they acquire ability genetically to produce methylase enzyme, which methylates the sites where clindamycin binds to the ribosome. So methyl ribosomes do not allow clindamycin to bind, and hence the organism becomes resistant. This is commonly seen in Staphylococcus aureus, a very notorious organism. So what is its spectrum of action? Mainly spectrum of action is gram positive organism, both cocci and bacilli, as well as aerobes and anaerobes. Clindamycin is highly effective against anaerobic organisms including Bacteroid fragilis. Gram positive cocci like streptococci, almost majority of the Staph aureus except MRSA. So many of the MRSA, they are not susceptible to clindamycin, methicillin resistant Staph aureus. Other organisms include Corynebacterium diphtheria, Nocardia asteroides, Actinomyces israeli, Toxoplasmosis, and some Plasmodium falciparum. Yes, majority of the Plasmodium falciparum species, they are inhibited at high concentrations of clindamycin, and so clindamycin effective is effective against many of the protozoal infections. Its high activity against anaerobes like Bacteroid fragilis, Clostridia, and many others. Pharmacokinetics, clindamycin can be given orally as well as parenterally. Its oral absorption is very good. So preferred route is, if the patient is not serious, the preferred route is by oral. It penetrates most skeletal and soft tissues, but not the brain and CSF. So good concentrations are attained in bones and soft tissues, but not in CSF. Metabolized in liver, metabolites are excreted in urine. Adverse effects, two main adverse effects, that is rashes, abdominal pain, and urticaria. But the most important adverse effect that we need to remember is that of superinfection, and that is development of diarrhea, particularly due to Clostridium difficile. Now, if you can recollect, Clostridium difficile is the causative organism which causes pseudomembranous colitis. So clindamycin is one of those drugs which is responsible for causation of Clostridium difficile colitis. Pseudomembranous enterocolitis, it manifests itself as watery diarrhea, fever, and passage of lot of mucus in the stools. Okay, when such symptoms appear after 3 to 4 days of onset of clindamycin, then pseudomembranous colitis should be suspected, and immediately the drug should be discontinued and metronidazole should be started. If given intravenously, it can cause thrombophlebitis of the injected vein. Uses include, mainly it is used for mixed infections where you think anaerobic organisms are the causative. Then in those conditions, as a part of combination therapy, clindamycin is to be preferred, particularly when we suspect Bacteroid fragilis can be one of the causative organisms. The abdominal abscess, pleural abscess, lung abscess, all these abscesses, majority of these abscesses contain anaerobic organisms. So here clindamycin can be combined with one of the other drugs like third generation cephalosporin or an aminoglycoside. Skin and soft tissue infections caused by streptococci or staphylococci in patients who are allergic to penicillin. Remember, for skin soft tissue infections, beta lactams are the drug of choice, but if the patient is allergic to beta lactams, then clindamycin can be used as a second line drug. Anaerobic infections, all anaerobic infections, be it Clostridia, be it Bacteroids, then clindamycin can be used. Okay. Now some uses related to their effect on protozoas like toxoplasmosis. So in AIDS patient, toxoplasmosis infection is common where clindamycin can be combined with pyrimethamine to control these infection, toxoplasmo encephalitis. Next is in malaria, it can be used along with quinine During pregnancy, in pregnancy, doxycycline, which is normally the drug of choice, is contraindicated. So, in the place of tetracycline, we can use clindamycin for combination therapy of uncomplicated Plasmodium falciparum malaria. And along with primaquine for the treatment of patients having pneumocystis jirovecii pneumonia in HIV or AIDS patients. So this is all about clindamycin. Next we come to the another group which includes glycopeptide antibiotics. Okay, as the name suggests, these are chemically glycopeptide in nature. Two members are commonly known. One is vancomycin and the second one is teicoplanin. Vancomycin is very commonly used in clinical practice. Both are bactericidal. Okay, they both act by inhibiting cell wall synthesis. So basically glycopeptide antibiotics are cell wall synthesis inhibitors. How do they act? Now if you can recollect your bacterial cell wall components, you will easily remember these. They are the repeats of N-acetylmuramic acid and N-acetyl glucosamine. To N-acetylmuramic acid, a pentapeptide is attached consisting of L-alanine, D-glutamic acid, L-glycine, D-alanine and D-alanine. Always remember this is this D-alanine, D-alanine, the terminal 2 peptide, it is the binding site for vancomycin. Okay, the vancomycin binds here. Okay, and it does not allow these horizontal cross linking of N-acetylmuramic acid and N-acetyl glucosamine. So this horizontal cross linking of these monomers is not done, and the step inhibited is known as transglycosylation. So transglycosylase step is inhibited. What happens is vancomycin, by binding to this D-alanine D-lactate, it does not allow the bactoprenol lipid carrier to separate from here and does not allow this transglycosylation step to take place. Hence, the transglycosylase step is inhibited by vancomycin. Now, if you can remember, this step is one step previous to that of cross-linking of adjacent monomers, which is inhibited by beta-lactam. So, beta-lactam inhibit this step. Vancomycin inhibit the previous step in bacterial cell wall formation. So bacterial cell wall polymerization is inhibited by vancomycin. This reaction by transglycosylase enzyme is inhibited by vancomycin. Very, very easy. Spectrum of action: all Staph aureus including methicillin resistant Staph aureus is inhibited by this vancomycin and teicoplanin. All streptococci including Streptococcus viridans, all enterococci, that is Enterococcus faecium and faecalis both, and Clostridium difficile, the causative organism of pseudomembranous colitis. Other gram positive cocci, Neisseria and Clostridia. Neisseria includes Neisseria meningitidis as well, and all Clostridia are inhibited. How do bacteria develop resistance to vancomycin? Now, the notorious amongst these organisms, that is those organisms which develop resistance to vancomycin, include Staph aureus as well as Enterococci, and they are labeled as respectively as VRSA and VRE, that is vancomycin resistant Staph aureus and vancomycin resistant Enterococci. The mechanism of resistance is plasmid mediated alteration in the dipeptide target site, the site where vancomycin binds, that is the D-alanine the terminal D-alanine sequence, that is altered. So in place of the last D-alanine, either a serine or a lysine binds. This structure does not allow the binding of vancomycin, and thus bacteria develop resistance to this particular drugs. Widespread use in hospitals has now led to the development of VRSA and VRE. So that we have discussed. Pharmacokinetics: neither of the drug is absorbed orally and therefore both the drugs, if we want to use for systemic administration, they have to be given by IV infusion. They are widely distributed in serous cavities including meninges, so they can cross the blood brain barrier and they attain good concentration in the CSF. Excreted unchanged by glomerular filtration, so dose has to be reduced in patients who are renally insufficient. Their kidney function is not proper, you have to reduce the dose. Side effects: concentration dependent hearing problems or nerve deafness. Majority of the time it is reversible on discontinuation of the drugs, but some cases even after discontinuation of drug the hearing may remain impaired in some patients. Nephrotoxicity: yes, vancomycin and teicoplanin both are highly nephrotoxic, particularly when either the patient is having pre-existing kidney disease or concomitant other nephrotoxic drugs are being going on. So caution is to be warranted in those patients who are receiving nephrotoxic drugs or having pre-existing renal condition. In those cases we should use vancomycin with great amount of caution. Skin allergy and fall in blood pressure on IV injection can occur, and vancomycin has the potential to release histamine from the mast cells, which can lead to flushing, urticaria, chills, fever. Now this particular syndrome of redness that is due to flushing, chills, is known as red man syndrome. Okay, this occurs only with vancomycin when it is injected rapidly. So vancomycin infusion should never be given rapidly and it should always be given as a slow IV infusion. Uses: so vancomycin is used orally. Here it is not absorbed, it reaches the large intestine where Clostridium difficile has caused pseudomembranous colitis. For this purpose systemic administration is not required, so we can use it orally to eliminate Clostridium difficile only when metronidazole is not effective. So metronidazole is a drug of choice for this Clostridium difficile induced pseudomembranous colitis, but in case when metronidazole is not effective or a patient is having adverse effects with metronidazole, we can use oral vancomycin. Otherwise for all other systemic infections we have to use vancomycin by IV route. We cannot use it intramuscularly as well because intramuscular injection of vancomycin is very painful. So severe nosocomial infections due to MRSA, that is methicillin resistant Staph aureus, enterococcal endocarditis, alternative drugs for skin and soft tissue infection caused by other gram positive bacteria like drug resistant streptococci, and it is also first line drugs for empirical therapy of meningitis. So a third generation cephalosporin along with vancomycin, and in some cases where we suspect listeria, ampicillin as well. This three drug cocktail is used for empirical therapy of bacterial meningitis until we receive the results of CSF culture and the culprit organism is directly identified. Till then, for empirical therapy, vancomycin along with third generation cephalosporin is the drug of choice. Also for some febrile neutropenic patients where we do not know the cause of organism, empirically we can give vancomycin. Next is teicoplanin, another member of glycopeptide group. So it has same mechanism of action as well as mechanism of resistance and spectrum of action same as that of vancomycin. It's more active than vancomycin against enterococci. So some VRE, that is vancomycin resistant enterococci, are susceptible to teicoplanin. Toxicity is less than vancomycin and it includes rashes, fever, granulocytopenia. Now this red man syndrome is not encountered with teicoplanin, that is not seen with teicoplanin, but still teicoplanin also has to be given by slow IV infusion, and rarely it is ototoxic. Also it is nephrotoxic but to a lower extent than vancomycin. Next comes the oxazolidinones, linezolide. It is the first member of a new class of synthetic antimicrobial agents known as oxazolidinones. It is primarily bacteriostatic in nature, primarily bacteriostatic in nature. Its spectrum of action includes gram-positive cocci, that is aerobic and anaerobic both, as well as gram-positive bacilli like Corynebacteria, like Listeria, like Nocardia, and many more. It also inhibits MRSA, VRSA, that is vancomycin resistant Staph aureus, some vancomycin resistant enterococci, penicillin resistant Strep pyogenes, pneumoniae, Strep viridae. All these are inhibited by linezolid. So basically linezolid is a member, or is a drug which mainly acts on multi-drug resistant organisms, those organisms which are notoriously resistant to a large number of drugs. That is its spectrum of action. In addition to that, it inhibits Corynebacterium, Listeria, Clostridia, Bacteroides fragilis. One more notable thing to consider regarding linezolid is its activity against Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So it is active against Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and hence linezolid is one of the components of antimicrobial therapy of tuberculosis for multi-drug resistant and extensively drug resistant organisms. How does it act? It acts by inhibiting bacterial protein synthesis, but the site of action as well as the mechanism is a little different from other traditional protein synthesis inhibitors like aminoglycoside, tetracycline, chloramphenicol and macrolides. It acts at an early step and a site which is different from that of other protein synthesis inhibitors. So what happens is, this is the mRNA, this is the 30S ribosomal subunit, and this is our F-methionine tRNA. So basically this is the F-methionine tRNA initiation complex. So the linezolid binds to this 23S fraction of 50S ribosome and interferes with the formation of this formyl methionine tRNA initiation complex. So initiation of protein synthesis does not take place. This binding distorts the tRNA binding site and stops protein synthesis before it can start. How do bacteria acquire resistance to this organism? Linezolid resistance is due to mutation in the 23S ribosomal binding site. So any mutation in the binding site leads to linezolid resistance. It's mainly seen in enterococci. Yes, enterococci are notorious for developing resistance to a large number of organisms. Pharmacokinetics, linezolid can be given orally as well as intravenously. Oral absorption is good. It's metabolized in the liver and then those metabolites are excreted in urine. Uses mainly for the treatment of complicated and uncomplicated skin, soft tissue infection. So orthopedic surgery department, there most of the times this drug is commonly used. Community and hospital acquired pneumonia, bacteremia and other drug resistant infections. Treatment of multi-drug resistant and extensively drug resistant tuberculosis. Okay. Please remember, you should be restricted to serious nosocomial infections due to multi-drug resistant organism. Please remember, we have to keep this drug as a reserve drug for those organisms which are multi-drug resistant, which are not responding to our traditional beta-lactams, cephalosporins or any other such drugs like febrile neutropenia, wound infections and others. Adverse drug reactions: abdominal pain, nausea, taste disturbances and diarrhea, rashes, pruritus. Yes, this is the serious toxicity of linezolid, out of which this thrombocytopenia is one of the most severe ones, where thrombocytopenia should be suspected after 7 to 10 days of therapy with linezolid, and the chances of developing myelosuppression or thrombocytopenia is more when The therapy is prolonged for more than 15 or more days. Always remember linezolide is also a MAO inhibitor. MAO is monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So it has interactions with SSRIs and other adrenergic drugs. The next includes the other drugs, out of which the first is quinapritin, dalfopristin. These are two pristinamycin antibiotics which act together and produce synergistic effect. So when they are used individually, they both are bacteriostatic, but when they are used in combination, they are having bactericidal effects, where quinapritin is used in the ratio of 30 and dalfopristin in 70. 30-70 ratio is used for these two drugs. Both act by inhibiting bacterial protein synthesis, and they are mainly active against gram-positive cocci. So they are kept as a reserve drug for staph, multi-drug resistant staph like MRSA, VRSA and VRE. Also some Neisseria, Legionella and Chlamydia, that is those organisms which are causative of atypical pneumonia. So used mainly for serious nosocomial infection caused by MRSA, VRSA and VRE, that is skin structure infections, then wound infections, then pneumonia, osteomyelitis, all these infections caused by multi-drug resistant organisms, this drug is preferred. Next is spectinomycin. It is an aminoglycoside like drug, so mainly acts on gram negative aerobic bacilli, and it acts by inhibiting bacterial protein synthesis. It is bactericidal in nature. It inhibits a limit gonorrhea. The only indication of using spectinomycin is multi-drug resistant gonorrheal infection. But for this purpose also we have better drugs like ceftriaxone and azithromycin. So this is not preferred for, or not used as a first line drug for this condition as well. Can cause chills, fever and urticaria when given as an intramuscular or intravenous injection. Next is mupirocin. Now mupirocin is mainly used topically. It is obtained from Pseudomonas and it is used topically as cream, ointment, eye drops, ear drops. The activity is mainly against gram positive bacteria like Streptococcus pyogenes, Staph aureus, etc. It inhibits bacterial protein synthesis, so acts by inhibiting bacterial protein synthesis. It is bacteriostatic, so it's used topically as eye drops, ear drops, cream, ointment for folliculitis, furunculosis, impetigo, infected wounds and infected insect bites. When applied locally, it causes itching, burning and redness. No systemic side effects are seen for mupirocin. Next is fusidic acid. It is a steroidal, narrow spectrum steroidal antibiotic. So its structure is resembling a steroid. Blocks protein synthesis, mainly acts against penicillinase producing Staphylococcus aureus. This is the organism which is responsible for skin and soft tissue infections. So it is used topically for boils, furuncles, folliculitis, psychosis barbae and other cutaneous infections. Next is polymyxin B and colistin. So these are basic polypeptides obtained from Bacillus polymyxus and Bacillus colistinus. They active mainly against gram negative aerobic bacteria. These are not active against Serratia, Proteus, Stenotrophomonas and Burkholderia species. How do they act? They are bactericidal in nature. They have a detergent like action and they interact with the phospholipids of the cell membrane and thus disrupt them, allowing the synergism with other antimicrobial agents as they allow their entry into the bacterial cell. Bacteria develop resistance to this drug rarely, but it is now found commonly against Acinetobacter and Klebsiella. Yeah, these two organisms, they are notorious to develop resistance against a large number of drugs. Okay, so initially what happened was polymyxin B and colistin, they were discovered very much earlier, but the problem was their systemic use was associated with a lot of toxicity. But nowadays, organisms which are resistant to a number of traditional drugs, they have been found to be sensitive to polymyxin B and colistin. So their resurgence in systemic use is there, and traditionally they have been used topically. So their topical use currently it is there. Uses include systemic use for a variety of systemic infections when multi-drug resistant organisms are involved, like Pseudomonas, bacteremia, pneumonia, bone joint infections, burns, cellulitis, cystic fibrosis, etc. For topically, it has used as an ointment, eye drops, ear drops for skin infection, burns, otitis externa, conjunctivitis, corneal ulcer, etc. Adverse drug reactions, little or no absorption. When you use them topically as ointments or eye drops, ear drops, no absorption takes place from these sites, hence it is very safe to use them topically. Some local site reactions like necrosis, itching, redness, itching, etc. can occur. When given systemically, they can cause nephrotoxicity. Neurological reactions like weakness, apnea, vertigo, paresthesia, etc. can occur. Next group is bacitracin. It is obtained from Bacillus subtilis. It is active mainly against gram-positive organisms, cocci and bacilli. It acts by inhibiting bacterial cell wall synthesis, which is at a step earlier than that inhibited by penicillins. It is mainly used topically as ointment for infected wound, ulcers, and eye infections. Okay, so uh, so to summarize them, these miscellaneous antibiotics, these are not traditional antibiotics, these are not classified into traditional antibiotics, but they have their own place, they are used very commonly in clinical conditions. And if you have any queries, then you can call or WhatsApp on the number shown in the slide. So stay home, stay safe. Thank you.